Good morning. I'm Doug Shaw. I'm the pulpit minister from the Lake Milton Church of Christ. We tape our sermons now, so that's what we're doing today. The title of my sermon is, I'll Meet You in Heaven. And when you think about that, you know, that's going to be a glorious place for us, heaven. And I've heard it said time and time again that our choices in life matter. We know this is true because of life. Our life is always shaped by the choices we make. We make our choices, and our choices turn out to make us, usually. And as I pondered that situation, I realized that at the age of 63, I'm nothing more than the sum total of all the choices I've made over the years in my life. I am what I am, as Popeye would say. Where I am and what I'm doing is a result of the 1,000 choices that I made over the years, in a long period of time. When I was in the 6th or the 7th grade, I had my eye on this pretty girl, and I really didn't think how I was actually going to approach her or talk to her. I really don't remember how I did actually introduce myself to her, but she's my wife, and she has helped make me what I am also. And she has made my dash better. And I know you're thinking, what's a dash? Did he miss something, or did he misspeak again? Let me explain. If you go to the cemetery and you look at any gravestone, underneath the name you will see something like this: 1837-1862. And poor Ben Better, he had been better probably, because he's dead now, and he only lived to be 25 years old. We see the date there, and then we see the death there. And then we see the dash, and that's everything else that circumferences that person's life. Everything, that dash. And perhaps we should put life in this perspective and say, I'll meet you in heaven, and have that as a goal. Back in 2003, my two sons, Chris and Dougie, and myself purchased a condo in Fort Myers, Florida. And it was about 30 minutes from the beach. It was a really nice place. And a friend of ours had a condo that was right downtown Fort Myers, and it was on about the 7th floor. And we were going down for the Christmas holiday for a 2-week vacation down there. So he gave us the key to his condo so we could go in and look at it. It was up on about the 7th floor. And when you stepped out on the balcony, you could see the ocean and you could see the beach. And that morning, there are not even any footprints on the beach yet even. And as you look out through there and you could see the ocean, it seemed like it just stretched away into infinity. And the day's blue sky it just seemed like it was an envelope for the sea. And it was hard to tell where the sea ended and where the sky began. And anyone heading west from there would soon disappear from sight. And you could see way off in the distance, you could see looked like a large cruise ship that was going over the horizon. And you could sit there and watch it go over and disappear. And I was thinking, all those people, where were they going? And every one of them had a dash. And they were living out that dash. And we know that an ocean voyage has often been used as a metaphor for death. You board the ship, you set sail, and slowly the ship disappears over the horizon. You know the ship is bound to make harbor on another shore, but exactly where is hidden from your view. And we're on that voyage this morning. We're creating that dash. And as I mentioned before, that dash is what represents our lives. How will it be filled? What are you doing with it today? That will someday mark your gravestone, that dash. What are you doing with it? What will people say about that dash? We all have to navigate through that dash. And I went to the wonderful internet for this description. One of the most familiar navigation tools in the world is the compass. The compass can be used as a navigation tool on land and sea and in the air. Compasses were first used by the Chinese perhaps as early as 206 BC. And by the 1st century, the compass was the premier navigational tool for explorers around the globe. With little understanding of how it worked, no one understood how it worked. In fact, they actually thought that it was some sort of magic or witchcraft. And actually, the captains were sometimes forced to hide them in their pockets because people were so superstitious of them, I guess. Thought they might be bad luck or something. And it was rumored that the tool was linked to an unearthly power. And that's why the ship captains hid him. Modern day science tells us that the compass indicates direction relative to the Earth's magnetic poles. So we know that. But just as you navigate a ship, plane, or a car, navigating through that dash has to take some planning. First, we need to pick the right pilot and also use the right map. We need to find someone that maybe has made the journey before. And I see people lots of times asking people, "You've been there before, can you tell me how to get there?" I've heard them say that. And we need to pick someone that made the trip. And this morning I need to tell you that Jesus has made that trip that we will embark on from earth to heaven. And I have to tell you this morning also not to try to navigate that trip alone. And Jesus has to be the pilot of that trip. I know you probably have seen the bumper sticker, "God is my co-pilot," but I tell you this morning that God has to be your pilot, not just your co-pilot. You'll never make it on your own, but we know that Jesus has made that trip. And if He's your pilot, you have to keep in mind that He's never left anybody. He's never lost a passenger yet. And the map you need is the Bible. Critics have said it's been translated and it may not be reliable. But I say to them that God is not going to give us a book where we can find the plan of salvation and then turn around and judge us from that book that was false. He's not going to do that. The important stuff is not up for debate. Read it, believe it, and the plan is in black and white. I want to do a comparison this morning to a captain navigating a ship to get it docked and God guiding us through life with His Word. There was a certain harbor in Italy that could be reached only by sailing up a narrow channel between dangerous rocks and shoals. Over the years, many ships had been wrecked and the navigation was very hazardous. And to guide the ship, what they did was they put 3 poles with a light on top of each pole. And the ship captain had to line up those lights to make it only be one light. And once he did that, he knew that he could navigate straight into the harbor and not have any problems. If he sees 2 or 3 lights, he knows he's off course and he needs to get back on course. And he could be in danger. And we're told in John 14:6, Jesus said to him, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." So we have the pilot and we have the map. What more do we need? Well, I think we need each other. We need each other's Christian fellowship and each other's Christian love to be able to navigate through our lives. And I get a lot of support from my Christian friends. Have you ever had bad luck with a GPS? We were going to a Friday night sing at Alliance one night, not knowing that they had built a new building. And we followed that GPS right to the end, and it said, "Your destination is on the left." And there was a vacant lot there. So we had to turn around and we had to ask some neighbors, "Where's the church?" So they told us where it was. But that was really the only bad luck I've ever had with the GPS. I've heard real horror stories over it, but that was the one that I had. But man may lead you astray, but God's Word will never lead you astray. With that said, what I want to do this morning is, I know you've heard this story over and over and over again, but I want to go through Joseph's life, but I want to go through it, looking through it with Joseph's eyes, because we're kind of at what you might call a disadvantage reading this story because we know how it ends. But as Joseph was experiencing it, he didn't know what the next thing was going to be, and he didn't know what was coming. Joseph always trusts God. Turn your Bibles this morning to chapter 37 of Genesis. And I did something a little bit differently this morning. The Bible verses aren't up there, so we'll have to use our plain old Bibles in order to look that up. Chapter 37. And let me read some of these verses. Now Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. This is the history, or the dash, of Jacob. Or Joseph, I'm sorry. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flocks with his brothers, and the lad was with the sons of Bea, and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. He was his last son, his baby son. Also, he made him a tunic of many colors. Now, what we have to see here is that Israel, Joseph's father, caused some of his problems. If you as a parent pick one of your children as a favorite, me and my wife have our favorites. She doesn't like me to say that, but she's Jason, my son that preaches, she's his favorite, her favorite. And but he is the one son that calls her almost every day or every other day to see how she's doing. So that's a closeness that they do share. And I guess I'm probably closer with my daughter than I am my sons, but we try to make it even. But what I'm trying to get at here is he was kind of fueling the fire because his brother, Joseph's brother, could figure out that his dad liked him a little bit better than they. So let's read on. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and he took it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, "Please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaves arose and also stood upright, and indeed your sheaves stood all round and bowed down to my sheaves." And his brothers said to him, "Shall you indeed reign over us, or shall you indeed have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. And Joseph, he fueled the fire too. He just made it worse. He just made it a lot worse between him and his brothers because I'm not saying he didn't have the dreams. I know he did, but he might have wanted to keep them to himself maybe. But he told them anyway. And through Joseph's eyes, he's 17 years old. When we were 17 years old, nothing could get us, you know what I mean? We were we were king of the hill then, And that's probably the way he felt. Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Look, I have dreamed another dream, and this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me." So he told his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to you on this earth before you?" And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Now Joseph was rebuked by his father for doing this, telling of these dreams. But in his eyes, it was right to do that. He was, like I said, he was kind of maybe a little bit sure of himself, maybe a little bit full of himself. But then he still wasn't in trouble, but then his trouble came. Then his brothers went to feed their flock in Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, "Are your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." So he said to him, "Here am I." Then he said to him, "Please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the flock, and bring back word to me." So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. Now a certain man found him, and he was wandering in the fields. And the man asked him, saying, "What are you seeking?" So he said, "I'm seeking my brothers. Please tell me where they had went, feeding the flock." And the man said, "They have departed from here, for I heard they say, let's go to Dothan." So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. Now when they saw him afar off, even before he came near, they conspired against him to kill him. Then they said to one another, "Look, this dreamer is coming. Come therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit. And we shall say some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see that we'll see what becomes of his dreams." But Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, "Let us not kill him." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father." Now I want you to realize what happened here. They threw him into a pit. It could have been anywhere between 12 to 17 feet deep. He was 17 years old, but even that fall had to hurt. And we don't know how they threw him in either. They may have just run over there and just threw him in head first. Who knows? He may not have hit the ground with his feet. And when I was a kid playing in a barn, we decided it would be fun to jump off the hayloft down onto the floor. And I went first, unfortunately, and there was not enough hay on the floor. So I jammed my back real bad. I hit right on my rear end, and I jammed it real bad. So it may be even part of my back problems today. But then it comes to pass, when Joseph had come to his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colors that was on him. Then they took him and cast him into the pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. And they sat down to eat a meal. Then they lifted their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices, balm, and myrrh, on their way to carrying them down to Egypt. So Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is there if we kill him and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hands be upon him. For he is our brother and our flesh." And his brother listened. Then the Midianites' traders passed by. So the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. Then Reuben returned to the pit, and Reuben was the only one that had a level head that day. And he seen that he was gone, and he returned to his brothers and said, "The lad is no more. Where shall I go?" And I want you to think for a minute. Here he is, Joseph. His brothers hate him to the point where they threw him in a hole. They hate him to the point where they want to kill him. And then they hate him to the point that they're just going to go ahead and sell him into slavery. And they don't know how he's going to be treated as a slave. And he doesn't know how he's going to be treated. And hatred is a very powerful thing. And Satan uses it a lot. So they took Joseph's tunic, killed a kid of the goat, and dipped the tunic in the blood. Then they sent the tunic of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, "We have found this. Do you know whether it is your son's tunic or not?" And we know that when you lie, you have to do something to make sure that that lie is credible. So what they did was they put blood on the coat. And they deceived their father. And I'm thinking, how could you do that to your father? How could you put your father through so much sorrow over the hatred you had for your brother? But they did it. And he recognized it, and he said, "It is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Without doubt, Joseph is torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth on his waist, and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters arose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted, and he said, "For I shall go down into the grave to my son in mourning." Thus his father wept for him. Now the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of favor of the captain of the guard. Now, the story picks up in chapter 39, but due to time restraints, I'm not going to go through the whole story. I'm going to give you just a paraphrase of what happened to him. He was purchased by Potiphar, and he ended up working himself up to where he was the ruler of Potiphar's house. And then he was in trouble again. Good looks got him in trouble. Potiphar's wife had her eye on him, and he resisted her, but the last time he resisted her, he had to run out of the house, and she took his coat, and then she lied to her husband and said that something went on. And then after he got into prison, he interpreted a dream, and the person he interpreted it for got out of prison and was supposed to speak a good word for him to get out of prison, but he waited 2 years before that occurred. So he spent 2 more years in prison. And then he was restored to power. He was restored from prison, and he worked his way up again, all the way up to being assistant to the king of Egypt. And the moral of the story, or the ending of the story, is that Joseph's dash ended up saving his whole family, his whole generation of people, because of a drought that was in. And the dream that he interpreted for the king actually got the king to be prepared for the drought. So they were prepared for it. So they had food and plenty of it until the drought ended. But what I wanted to do is, like I said, I wanted, not knowing the end of the story, Joseph went through all that turmoil, all that hatred, all that stuff that being accused. Have you ever been accused of something you didn't do? It doesn't feel very pleasant. And he went through that also. And when I think over my life, the good and the bad, I have to say I'm glad I made the decision to follow Christ and be buried in baptism for the remission of my sins. And this morning we extend an invitation. If you need to obey the gospel, we can assist you in that this morning. If you've decided that you need to be baptized into Christ to be a member of the Lord's church, we can do that for you. Or if you've gone astray this morning and you need to come back to the Lord, He's waiting here for you with open arms. Please come as we stand and sing.